Welcome to Groups this week. As a church, we exist to help all people become fully devoted followers of Jesus. And we believe doing life together is a crucial part of that journey. Now, during this time, we're going to unpack and dig deeper into the sermon we've heard this past week. Let's dive in as we continue to grow in our faith, knowledge, and love of Jesus together.
Hey everybody, Pastor Brad here with Pastor John. And hey, we're jumping into a series on the Gospel of Luke. And we kind of did it covertly, actually, because it technically started about a month and a half ago as we stepped into telling the Christmas narrative. But if you haven't realized it yet, we're actually stepping into a series on the Gospel of Luke that's going to take us, probably a year,
probably over
longer,
a year.
And we're gonna dive in with a few breaks maybe here and there. But John, you preached on Luke chapter 2 verses 41 to 52.
Yeah.
And this narrative of Jesus and his parents traveling to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So can you just, before we talk through a few questions, can you just tell us a little bit about what goes on in this story, what happens in this story?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of super unique because it's kind of really the only window we get between his birth and Jesus as an adult. And so super interesting text. And what's happening here, kind of the drama in the narrative is, Mary, Joseph, Jesus gone up to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. And on the way back, Mary and Joseph are a full day's travel into the journey home. It's about 3 days total.
That's funny. I mean, that's funny in itself.
It's already funny.
They're already, social services is already being called.
I know.
Well, anyway.
I know. It's like, it makes you think of probably some of you guys watch Home Alone over Christmas.
Right.
You know when?
Yeah.
Catherine O'Hara's like,
really?
Kevin! It's like, Jesus! Like, where is he? And so, anyway, Jesus is lost. And the drama in the text is them going, oh my goodness, where's Jesus?
Yeah.
And they look around and they can't find him. And obviously they're traveling with a whole group of people. So it makes sense how, they just trusted that he was in the group. But they make their way back and they search for him. And after a couple of days, they find him in the temple. Imagine the relief. Some of you guys have lost a kid for a few minutes in the mall. It's terrifying. Try that for a few days. And they find him, and he's in the temple of Jerusalem, right at the center of religious life. And he is engaged in conversation with the teachers in the temple. And he's not just talking to them, but he's asking questions. He's learning. Right. So he's in a posture of learning and engaging with these teachers. And they, Mary and Joseph show up, and in classic Jesus fashion, they basically say, like, dude, what are you doing? Right. Like, what? Like, why are you here? And why did you do this to us? And classic Jesus, he answers their question with a question that just makes them look a little bit stupid.
Right.
And so he's basically like, his answer is really interesting, as we'll see in a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this kind of, the what's beginning to happen in this is we're seeing that he's starting to understand who he is. Right. And we're starting to see the priorities and the identity of Jesus kind of come into his life even as a 12-year-old boy.
Right. So are there maybe then challenges that we have to our understanding of Jesus?
Yeah.
Like in this story, the way he responds to first of all, what he does, then how he's interacting, and then how he responds to his parents. Yeah. That maybe challenge some ideas that we have about Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a human story. Right. And I think a story like this maybe presents some of the mystery. We get to see a part of the mystery because as Christians, we believe that Jesus is fully God and he's fully man. And here as a 12-year-old boy, we have Jesus learning and growing. And I mean, Luke says it right at the end. He increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. And so we're actually exposed to this idea that maybe we haven't thought of before, which is that, between the baby Jesus that we're used to and the adult, Jesus that we're used to, he had to grow. And he had to learn. And it brings us to this reality that Jesus really was human and some of the implications of that. Yeah. And so that's kind of challenging because maybe we've never had to think about that before. Right. So, Jesus isn't pretending to learn. He's actually learning. And we kind of have to deal with that theologically. Yeah. And so, it brings us to this idea, and I talked about this on Sunday, about, well, how does that work? Well, firstly, we have to admit that as Christians, the incarnation is a mystery theologically, which is to say that we can never fully understand it.
Can't completely nail it down, yeah.
But we can understand some parts of it. And so, Paul helps us later in Philippians 2. He talks about this idea of Jesus emptying himself, which doesn't mean that he stopped being God, but it meant that part of what Jesus did in humbling himself and taking on flesh was that he willingly chose to live within the constraints of what it means to be human. So he really did have to learn. He wasn't just pretending.
Right.
And so this idea, I think, even just kind of maybe brings us face to face with some things we haven't thought about before about who Jesus was. And we seem to get this idea from Scripture that Jesus kind of progressed in learning who he was, that he progressed in learning like what his calling and mission was.
Right.
Theologians disagree about exactly when he fully knew, but clearly in this text, like his response to his parents helps us see that he was beginning to get it.
Right. And so speaking of that, that interaction with his parents, what do you think what is the significance of that interaction that, in the classic Jesus style, as you said, that he had with his parents there in his response?
Yeah, so I'll just read it for us. Okay. In 49, he said to them, "Why were you looking for me?" Could you imagine being a parent hearing that? You'd be like, "I'm gonna kill you."
I was just thinking about that when we were first talking, because you think they're probably anticipating that his reaction is going to match theirs.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be like, "Oh, there you are." And here he is, just all relaxed.
Yeah. "Why were you looking for me?" Yeah. And this is what he says: "Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" Okay, so firstly, super important. If you're a Christian, you've grown up in church or you've been around, it's super familiar for you and me, Brad, to talk to God as our Father, right? We do it all the time. Heavenly Father. This is common language. It was not for Jesus. He's doing something new here. We know it because Jesus modeled us and taught us to do that.
And offered it to us.
And he gave it to us. But in the Old Testament, God is referred to as the Father of nations. It's talked about in a corporate sense. But Jewish boys and men and women don't go to God and say, "Hey, I'm in my Father's house." That's not how they talk. So firstly, Jesus was kind of in this moment revealing something about who he understood himself to be. That he had this unique relationship with God the Father, and it was natural and normal to him. And then the other part is he's referring to this need and priority to be in his Father's house. And the temple, as we know, was such a central part of God dwelling with his people. And that's the whole story of the Bible is essentially from the beginning, God being creating the world to dwell with his people, sin getting in the way, and then from that moment God coming after his people and trying to answer this question: how is God going to deal with the sin that separates? And the temple was kind of a temporary measure. It was a way of God dwelling and being amidst a sinful people. And so for Jesus to be right there is very telling, because we know that ultimately what Jesus is going to go on to do is to be the fulfillment of the temple. He's sitting here as a 12-year-old boy within the vicinity of the altar where the blood of the animals is being spilled. And what do we know? He one day, in a matter of years, is himself going to spill his blood and render that as a once and for all sacrifice to deal with sin fully. He's right next to the Holy of Holies, whereas there's this curtain separating the presence of God from a sinful people. And we know that in a matter of years, through Jesus' death, at the moment, Luke records it. It's in the same gospel that the temple curtain upon Jesus' death is going to rip in two, signifying that separation between God and man through what Jesus has done is no longer, and that we can enter boldly into God's presence.
And that this is an act of God's grace. Because Luke points out it rips from the top to the bottom.
It's God's grace.
Beautiful.
And so already, as a 12-year-old boy, Jesus is speaking to his identity and he's speaking to his mission. And it's pretty huge.
Great. Well, it's too bad you're not excited about it. But hopefully, thank you very much for joining us. Hope you guys have a great conversation in your groups. God bless.
Bless you.
Hope you enjoyed the teaching today. If you're wanting to follow along with the community group's discussion guide with your group, you can head to cachurch.ca/media, where you can find the discussion guide. Not only are there questions there related to the sermon, but there's also prayer prompts that relate to the passage or the topic that we were talking about, and practices that you can, on an individual level or a group level, begin integrating into your life to not only bring the knowledge into your mind, but to begin living it out.